7:45 a.m. on this morning of January 2nd, 2026, Friday. I need to get a couple of things off my chest before I go out and about into the woods, tending to my daily chores, with that being the caregiving of our wildlife. Over the last few years, the theorists have come out and basically destroyed the narrative of contrails and that of so-called chemtrails, especially through people such as myself that has spent a great deal of time, effort, energy, and even money recording the skies and sharing raw recordings of these sky operations that take place that creates the weather today. Many, such as myself, and through these raw recorded sky observations, have shown jet aircraft side by side, one displaying the typical contrail, whereas a fellow traveler up there will have these very lengthy and thick plumes of trails or streamers, which many declare are not contrails, but yet the narratives are actually basically the same, because condensation trails are chemtrails because they are exhausts from the aircraft, as well as whatever releases might take place through said aircraft, right? Okay, so we've destroyed that narrative of what we see or observe these aircraft and their tails, trails, or streamers. But what is really starting to irritate me is the factor that people still are not making the connections, the real connections, as to what many still claim as being halos. Now, let's go a bit further into this and my explanation as to my irritation in regards to said phenomena as halos. Okay, so we go to this book here, Webster's 7th New Colgate Dictionary, which is rather old, but the definition is still very relevant. Halo. Okay? Now, unfortunately, I have a display on my screen with my opted buttons for control, so that kind of interferes with my reading through the screen of this. So, halo, a circle of light appearing to surround the sun or moon and resulting from refraction or reflection of light by ice particles in the atmosphere, something resembling a halo. Nimbus. Sorry about that. I am reading over the phone. A differentiated zone surrounding a central object. The aura of glory, veneration, or sentiment surrounding an idealized person or thing. Okay, such as like an angel or a saint or that sort of nonsense. Correct? Let's continue on. So, what is nimbus? Okay, rainstorm, cloud. A luminous vapor, cloud, or atmosphere about a god or goddess when on earth. A cloud or atmosphere as of romance about a person or thing. An indication as a circle of radiant light or glory about the head of a drawn or sculptured divinity, saint, or sovereign. The rain cloud that is of uniform grayness and extends over the entire rain cloud that is of uniform grayness and extends over the entire sky, a cloud from which rain is falling. Okay, let's continue on. So we go to this, well, rather old book as well, but it is one of my go-to books when it comes down to certain phenomena pertaining to the sky. So let's go ahead and see what this book has to say about halos. The atmosphere plays many curious optical tricks, from sideways mirages to all red rainbows to radar angels. The venerable laws of optical reflection, refraction, and color dispersion are adequate to explain the great majority of these frequently breathtaking displays of colors, shadows, halos, and distorted images. Undoubtedly, the same laws will ultimately explain most of the rare phenomena described below, but the theoretical attempts made so far have not been completely satisfactory. How can one account for elliptical halos, kaleidoscopic suns, long delayed radio echoes, and all the trickery of mirages? Actually, only a few scientists take much interest in atmospheric optical phenomena. They are for the most part content that these atmospheric anomalies can be brought into the fold of the scientifically explained with little effort, that we already know all that is really important about light, color, and the propagation of radio waves in the atmosphere. Now today we also are dealing with digital frequencies. So that has to be taken into account, which is different than the traditional analog radio waves. Okay? This attitude is, of course, smug and dangerous. Some of the ephemeral phenomena of this chapter pinpoint areas of genuine scientific ignorance, perhaps not so much ignorance of the basic laws of optics as of the fine structure of our atmosphere and its interfaces with the Earth's surface and outer space. Okay, so we'll go ahead and skip a little bit here, but let's go ahead and go to unusual halos among suns. Now, this is where we get to the real definition of so-called halos. Misty rings around the sun and moon are rather common, a fixture of weather lore. The most frequently observed halos have radii of 22 degrees and 46 degrees and are readily explained in terms of the reflection and refraction of sunlight or moonlight from two different shapes of ice crystals in the atmosphere. Rare halos with different radii as well as various arcs and tangents are also recognized, all fairly well understood in terms of meteorological optics, that is, understood as reflections and refractions from other types of crystals falling in different orientations through the atmosphere. Despite the power of optical theory, many other halo phenomena cannot be accounted for. They are, as modern parlance has it, unrecognized. How can optics explain offset and non-circular halos? Even perfectly square halos have been reported. All manner of peculiar and unexplained arcs grace otherwise normal halo displays. Mind you, the word normal, okay? Deviations from theory are many and varied. Of course, ice crystals come in many shapes and sizes, and the atmosphere itself is plagued with irregularities, such as these trails, right? conceivably, if we knew all the conditions, meteorological optics might come up with reasonable explanations. Nevertheless, as many departures from recognized displays make it clear that there are significant gaps in our understanding of natural light and color phenomena. Okay, so we go on down here for just a tad bit more. Okay, halo phenomena are due to refraction and reflection of the light of the sun or moon by ice crystals that are often very complicated and diverse owing to the variety of crystal forms and large possible number of refractions and reflections. Refraction phenomena, especially those due to sunlight, are sometimes beautifully colored. Okay, the common halo of 22 degrees radius formed by refraction of hexagonal crystals at a 60-degree angle and which may be seen entire or in part on about 200 days of the year. This halo enjoys an enormous reputation as a sign of bad weather, which, as it is often seen in the cirrostratus in front of a depression, is not unfounded. It also occurs often in fragments and fine weather cirrus. It is usually not well colored, appearing as a narrow whitish ring, reddish on the inside. This is your common halo, which is more or less like a single line around the sun that is sort of yellowish to a golden color, okay, and which can bring about your mock suns or sundogs. Okay, that is your common halo, not what we have been seeing over the last few years of these multicolored spectrum images, if you will, because that is being created through, yes, these tails, trails, and streamers, and not through your typical, shall we say, through the typical process of evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. Okay? No, that is all being orchestrated today, and therefore, these colorful rings that we see, even the rainbows, is due to these sky operations, through which many claim to be chemtrails. Okay? I am, this is why I say, okay, all of what we see, those that actually spend time outside recording the skies and taking time to observe these operations from start to finish, such as I show on my channel repetitively over and over for quite a few years now, in which I can actually provide a timetable of when these colorful rings really started to appear. I have documented all of this, and I've documented how they are created through these tails, trails, and streamers. Okay? And which do not correlate with what is explained as how these rings come about through specific degrees of angularities. Okay? Just like these chemtrails that stick around for hours, that go for miles and miles, and that, eventually spread out from being that trail into clouds or permacloud conditions or what have you. It is all an orchestration of science and not what used to be deemed as natural. Because if it was actually so called natural, we would be observing these actual degrees of angularity in conjunction with the sun, moon, or otherwise, in which this book here shows all types and styles of halos, okay, which even at the time of when many of these deductions came about through observational researchers, people that actually spent time out on the seas, in the mountains, down on ground level, above sea level, if you will. This is the notes from their observations. Okay? And there, yes, even back then, a lot of what was in the sky might have been influenced through certain sky operations because these have been going on for a very long time. Okay, and we now also have a lot of theories that our weather has always been manipulated and modified, controlled, if you will, such as is happening today. But many see these controlling factors in the form of UFOs. Okay? Which, yes, okay, I can agree with that sentiment. But I am not focused on that as I am focused on what is occurring today and what I have shown throughout my content pertaining to these fake halos, fake sundogs, fake mock suns, as they have all been created through these sky operations, through these aircraft, which may or may not even be jet aircraft. It could be remote controlled drones operating through AI. They could, they could be, well, many claim that a lot of these so called jets are actually spheres with holograms surrounding them as camouflage. When you're dealing with the clouds, that is enough to boggle the mind, let alone all of these strange phenomena. But some of these phenomena were actually labeled as natural, as they did have more natural significances than what we see today. But what I am trying to explain is the factor that what we do see, we have to understand that it is coming about through these sky operations. Flat out. They are not signs from God, even rainbows. Okay, because there's always a cloudy backdrop to these sightings. And of course, what do we see before the sightings? What do we hear? Yes, overhead air activities taking place. So don't be beguiled by these people that, that want to claim this, that, and the other thing, claiming that they know all when they don't spend 1 ounce of their energy nor time posting raw recorded observations from the sky, but sit there compiling so called researched evidence through online information. And then they come out with these really awesome videos using CGI or other types of animated garbage. And yet again, they don't spend any time outside. You can go to these channels and all they show is these really great animated illustrations of this, that, and the other thing, trying to explain this, that, and the other thing, and they don't spend any time recording the skies for themselves. I cannot take any credence into channels such as this, and I had an issue this morning with such a channel in which all I claimed was, hey, when it comes down to these halos and rainbows, they are created through these sky operations, and they are not what we once took as being natural phenomena, because they are not. And yet, one channel claimed that, oh, all this is derived directly from the Earth and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, go ahead. Go with those NASA explanations, and not with those that actually spend time observing and recording what really takes place, that brings all of these new phenomena in the sky about. I use my eyes, I use my camera, and I go from there. And from my observations, then comes the research. Not research and then look at the sky and say, oh, that's pretty. Oh, that's a sign of God. Oh, that's this, that's that. No. You have to understand the connections. I've recorded these so-called halos, probably more so than most any other channel out there. And I have recorded the before and after of these so-called phenomena. I provide the proof in the pudding. Whereas I was deemed as an armchair researcher. And this content creator, through me just saying, hey, no, what you're trying to explain is not of reality, because reality dictates that it is these sky observation or operations that have been taking place that brings about these colorful so-called phenomena. Well, this content creator, just through me saying that, went childish and began the name calling. That was it for me. That was enough proof in the pudding over who and what I was dealing with. A very narcissistic armchair researcher themselves. Yep. All right, that's enough of a rant for this second day of this brand new year. And I am headed on out once again to deal with natural natural aspects of this life. Take care, have a great one. That's enough for me. Skywise out.